Looking at the need to talk about the issues concerning TINUBU and governance, high costs of bloated structure and how to tackle that is the crux of what we're going to be looking at today. And I did say that I'm going to be having very, very distinguished analysts to discuss this with me, starting from my analyst in the studio, who is a lecturer at University of Benin, the immediate past chairman, ASU chapter, and the HOD of Chemistry Department, University of Benin, Professor Julius Iyasele. Thanks for joining me, Julius.
Thank you for having me this morning. Good morning, viewers.
And also joining me via Zoom, all the way from the United States, Texas, Houston, is a political analyst, a social media influencer, Ahmed Momodu. Good morning, Ahmed.
Good morning, Philip. Good morning, Prof. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. So quickly, I start off with you, Ahmed Momodu. Let's look at the issues concerning TINUBU and governance. You agree with me that since TINUBU, came up as president, there has been so much issues concerning how to tackle it headlong in terms of the economic downturn. He started with a petrol subsidy removal, and of course, looking at the need to have a lean government that will be effective. There has been all and sundry saying that there should be a reduction in the cost of governance. But he again is also surprising Nigerians with a huge list of 48 ministerial lists, that is up for the screening in the Senate. How do you make this? How do you see the start off of the president? Do you see it as that which we can say is working towards having a lean government and also reducing cost in governance?
Yes, thank you. That's an interesting question. The reason I say so is because I believe the initial problem that we had was as a result of the late start of former President Buhari's administration, and then the National Assembly came up with a law that mandated the president to compose and put forward members of his cabinet within 60 days of assumption of office. But by the time you remove the time it takes to inaugurate the National Assembly and put in the principal officers, that time probably reduces to about 20 days. Nonetheless, I think the law mandated him to also present nominees alongside their designated portfolios, so that there will be a thorough screening of the nominees, and the general public, Nigerians in general, will be able to realize and see who was being screened and for what position. To my surprise, I don't know if the law changed, but that wasn't the case. We saw screening of the nominees without their assigned portfolios. Nonetheless, the National Assembly went ahead and screened them. At the end of the day, I understand we had 48 designated appointees, but no portfolio was added. So what this indicates is that there's at least one per state, 36 states including the federal capital, that will be 37. And then we have 48, we have an excess of about 11 ministers. We're not able to say exactly where those people will fit into at this point in time, because, like I pointed out earlier, their portfolios were not mentioned. So we would have to wait to see how the president decides to assign offices to these places before we can actually conclude that the ministers are going to be 48 in number. I know there are some of the ministries that require junior ministers. That may be the case. And then we'll see when the list actually comes out and they are assigned. Until that is actually done, it's a bit difficult to say this is the number of ministers exactly until we are aware where they are going.
Well, reports reaching now says that we have 48 of them in the list, and also just now we had reports that El-Rufai, Danladi, and Otete is yet to be screened. And looking at what we have just now, Professor Julius Iyasele, well, we already have a list sent by the president, and it's 48. Do you concur with what Ahmed Momodu said, that we should wait before we determine the number of the ministerial nominees, which we already have?
He has provided a background, a theoretical background as it were, that is supposed to be one per state, which will bring us to about 36, isn't it?
Including Abuja.
Abuja.
37.
And then now you have 48. You know, but the issue I see here is we have a government that the Bible we call Reuben. Reuben was told in the Bible that he will be as unstable as water. And you have a government here now that takes decisions without thinking. Instead of engaging the brain first, you know, they gauge the action before they start thinking. Because if you have seen what has happened in the past since May and all that, you see that we are going back and forth. If it was going to be possible, I know that the fuel subsidy issue that the government or the president, as it were, removed on the day of his inauguration or something like that, he would have backtracked and all that. You remember there was the electricity thing waiting. Look at the current imbroglio that is going on now, whether to go to Niger to go and attack. Meanwhile, he had sent, you understand, shivers across that he was going to and all that. But right now, instead of engaging principal actors in all of this before, coming out in the open, make pronouncement and all that, now he is saying that blood is thicker than water. The northern and as it were, Nigeria politically have brothers across, and so that is now holding him, you know, spellbound, holding him in the balance and all that. The problem we have here is an unfortunate thing that we are going through as a nation. You are talking about lack of money, hardship. The people are going through untold hardship, as it were. Before coming to the studio now, you hardly will find vehicles on the way or on the road, except for the commercials, who obviously will make their money, you know, from, you know, the general public and all that, and then be able to subsume their cost in that. Many of the private vehicles are parked out of the road and all that, and then you will come and be making these spurious numbers. That's the way I put it, of ministers. I thought with what was already prevailing, that this government was going to come into power and reduce cost of governance. I thought the president was going to reduce the fleet of cars in his convoy and all that. But the first accusation was I had about 120 cars in his convoy and all that. And we have seen it repeat itself, because then some people said no, some belong to the state governor and all that, Lagos state governor and all that. But then look at the barrage of nominees as minister. To minister over what? They will at the end of the day find that there are no persons anymore they are talking with.
All right. Ahmed Momodu, we have a very, very precarious situation in Nigeria, and I understand that a lot, you know, is basically begging for attention. And like he said, like the professor said, concerning what the government should be focusing on in terms of reducing cost of governance, it seems otherwise from the way it appears. What do you make of that, Ahmed?
Well, it's easy to arrive at the conclusion that he has because of what appears to be the case. But like I said earlier on, it's important that we wait and see how this plays out. Yes, there are other issues about the bloated cost of governance, but the president has indicated that there's going to be a merging of the responsibilities of some of those ministries, and they are going to be reduced. The other MDAs are going to be reduced. They are going to be streamlined, I think, in line with the Orosanye reports that said some of these ministries have overlapping functions and they should be reduced. So it's possible that even though there's a standard cost of governance that is actually very difficult to deflate, to be honest. When you come to what the cost of running the federal government is, there are certain elements of it that cannot be avoided. And if there's work to be done, there's work to be done. But like the prof pointed out, they need to measure out what needs to be done with who is actually doing those jobs. And again, until we actually know where these people are supposed to be posted to, it becomes difficult to say. For example, we are not going to be able to say there should be 15 ministers when we don't know the number of ministries they are going to employ. So these are the issues that are a bit confusing at this point in time and don't make it easy to have that discussion clearly.
Ahmed Momodu, will you say it's confusing because looking at the numbers we have, 48 on the list, does that not show that there's no attempt by the president to reduce the ministries or the number of ministers that will be appointed? Because we have already 48 on the list, and then we also have about 560 commissioner designates waiting. And looking at the emoluments, the salaries that will be consumed even in a tenure of 4 years, it runs into billions. So from what we see in the size, do we need to wait for the handwriting to be interpreted by God before we know?
So this is the way we have to try and see where the balance is, because there is a cost of governance. There is a fundamental cost of governance. To run a federal style system of government is never going to be easy. If, for example, you put them 38 ministers by the side of the National Assembly and you're talking in excess of 500 people, that already is a bloated amount. What is 2 or 3 ministers going to make a difference in that cost of governance? So some of these things are things that we need to discuss, yes, but we have to put in place. We have to have a discussion side by side with the practicality of running government, the federal government, and what it entails. You cannot I want to talk about Adam without talking about Eve. We are talking about a federal government that is supposed to cover 36 states and Abuja, and you need ministers in that will cover all of that territory effectively. So we have to find a fine balance. Yes, it's tending towards a large number of ministers, but until we actually know where they are going to be posted to and the functions they are going to conduct. For example, you may even have ministers of special duties, and they will not have ministerial positions per se, but they may be cabinet officers. There are some of those offices that are cabinet rank, but they will not have standard ministries as we know them today. So again, like I said, we need to wait and have that conversation after they've been posted and we know clearly where they are going.
Okay, let's look at what you see about the president Tinubu's administration.
I have something to add there. It is purely political patronage. Let's not shy away from the fact. That is what we have been saying here. A point came when we started having senior and junior ministers, because people must be, people who have helped me into power must be paid back. And so the common patrimony that belongs to you and I now becomes something that is now used to service that is. We have some numbers of pillars of society. That is what it is. The ministers are not going to eventually take over the positions of governance in the state. They are governors in the state and all that. When you have some pillars of the society, you have education, you have health, you have maybe communication and all that. It's simply having one minister in all those positions, to dispense responsibility, and then they are domiciled in the state by the governors. So what is this we're having now? 48 ministers. First of all, is the ministers we had in the past, when it was one per state, were they really now or dispensing responsibility as it appeared affects the different states? It was not. Is it not the same pillars of society as I'm talking about? You talk about somebody in charge of education, and then he speaks from the education. You have the civil servants there, permanent secretaries, down the line, directors and all that. And so it takes decisions concerning education, and then it trickles down to even the state. And the state, they are there. You have the commissioners in the state. You have the governor, you have the commissioner, you have those in the National Assembly. All of these to appropriate all these responsibility. But what I'm seeing here, look at the assemblage.
Okay, are you by this saying that from what you can see from your perspective that the president seems not to be cutting down on cost of governance? At all.
I thought first day for somebody who had been in ADECO over these years and had tackled some government in the past, we come up and say no. The way we waste money in this country is getting too much. Then, okay, if he had established farm and sent many of these patronees to handle the different farms and all of that. Who will hear that? Okay, who is trying to jumpstart the economy and all that? Not that. Remember, you know, before you know, just now, you see billions of naira voted for SUVs for all of them, because the SY have taken their own away. You heard all of that during before this government took over and all that. Then you have all of that. The salary that for retinue of aides. One minister will have how many aides and all that. Where is the money?
Okay, well, Ahmed Mamadou, some experts have averred that for us to get it right, there must be a way to, you know, merge ministries, like you also said earlier, you know. And again, we cannot but also look at the requirements, you know, for the country in terms of having a federal outlook, you know, on the size of the number of ministers. Now, what do you see? Don't you see a setback maybe in the course of the constitutional provisions that already set the requirement that there should be, you know, a federal outlook in terms of having the size of the number of ministers? If we now reduce, or if there's now a merging of ministries, and then the ministers are now reduced to about 20 or 20 something, do you see that as falling short of federal character?
That's also a good question and a different angle to look at it from, because the constitutional requirement is that there must be one representative from each state and the federal capital. So we're talking about 37 ministries in the very least. Now, how the president chooses to interpret those constitutional provisions is a different thing entirely. My co-discussants highlighted some very salient issues, but we have to understand that it's not everything that appears on the federal level comes out on the state level also. For example, there's a Ministry of Defense that doesn't come out in the state. There's a Ministry of Internal Affairs, it doesn't come out in the state. There's a Ministry of Water Resources that doesn't come out in the state, and so on and so forth. So we need to balance out some of these discussions with the reality on the ground. And you have rightly pointed out that there's a constitutional requirement that already bloats that federal executive council by 37 members ab initio.
But is the president bound by it?
Exactly. Is
the president bound by it?
I'm afraid if that thing is constitutional.
Okay, so what the question is, which states do you suggest will want to relinquish its rights to have representation in the Federal Executive Council? We've seen how this agitation comes out in different ways. So one state says, okay, for example, you have two and then we don't have any. How do you now balance it out when you say federal character? The idea of federal character is an inclusive government, and that inclusive government requires a minimum of 37 ministers. How do you now go from there? So what we are talking about is the excess to the requirement, which is the 11 extra to make 48. That's what we are discussing right now. Quite all right, I agree, and I've said it clearly, that it appears to be bloated ab initio. But until these people are designated to their offices, it becomes difficult to say their access to requirements.
Okay.
Because we don't know what the requirements are.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we need to look at this as we take your reactions as per the requirement in having a federal character.
The requirement, federal character. What we have said in the is yes, having one representation at the federal level.
So if we continue to have that, I wouldn't have a link government.
But I didn't know before now that you must also have federal character in terms of ministerial appointment. I didn't know. I thought that all of that started masquerading when we were not trying to look for, trying to help assist people, who assisted me during the elections and all that. I didn't know it was a constitutional provision and all that. But if that be it, then it means that a long time, like people have argued, that constitution is skewed. So what is like I said, if you are talking, somebody sitting there talking about education, government is supposed to be involved with policy making, decisions and all that. Makes policy at the federal level. Policy is domiciled in the state by the commissioners of education and all that are closer to the people. Otherwise, the ministers, do you have designations? Minister of Education for Edo State, and all that. So if that is not there, what I thought is reduce cost of governance by giving these people other responsibility. Let them find something else to do.
All right. I think we will continue to interrogate the process, because all is expected. Because as the president assumed office, he demanded a lot of sacrifice from Nigerians, and Nigerians have been sacrificing. You know, looking at the petrol subsidy removal, the economic downturn, the hardship that Nigerians are really going through, the harrowing experiences, you know, already show that Nigerians are really up in sacrificing. But, well, a whole lot is expected from the government. Well, Ahmed Momodu, a Nigerian citizen but based in Texas, Houston, also averred to it that, well, a lot is needed to hold on and see how the administration will pan out in terms of the ministerial list, and how the confirmation we see through. Well, I think time only would be the litmus test to see if the government of the day is really ready to have a lean government, an effective one, rather than having a bloated structure like what we seem to see.